getting engaged and getting married, and then possibly down the line had another baby. So family was definitely a big part of it.
That's a big part of relationships. It's like the future planning. It's you start to, as the time goes by, and for a lot of people 9 months might not seem like a long time, but in that time it's endless conversations and starting to imagine a future and a life with this person. And as you're slowly growing closer and closer, and the walls are coming down and the trust is being built, and you're falling in love basically, you know and then you're envisioning this whole life with something, or of something with someone, and it starts to become part of you, and you just believe in it. And then the unthinkable happens, whether that is a breakup that was unexpected, someone having to move away, for a job, and it changes what the trajectory was of that relationship, or whether it's someone passing away. And so I know that Anthony unfortunately passed away unexpectedly.
Correct.
And I want to ask you, I know that you had a feeling something was wrong. Can you tell me a little bit about that time?
Um, it's so interesting because you don't know things until they happen to you. And um, a couple of months before, I would say like 3 months before or 6 months before, um, he started sending me like when the whole cell phones and basically internet kind of like shut down for like a couple of like hours, I think it was, and everybody was like going crazy. I remember the message he sent me. He said, "Babe, if anything happens and it's actually like the end of the world, I want you to know that I love you." And I'm thinking like back then nothing really clicks. Like when people tell you things, like people when they're about to pass away, they always tell you before, 6 months before
Mm-hmm.
to a year. Um, and I never really thought about it. I was like, okay. And I took it like literal. I said, okay, I love you very much and thank you for everything that you've done. And there would be like other signs where he would send me like a certain song, and it would be like a really strong, powerful song that you listen to and you're like, whoa. Um, some of it described his childhood, and it just would blow me away, just how the lyrics would describe it, because he wasn't really that good with like expressing himself, so he would always send me like things to like tell me what he was feeling. And sometimes, and then one day he sent me a really really sad song, and I said, "Are you okay?" He said, he laughed and he said, "Yeah, of course. Why?" I'm like, "Because this song is really sad, and it's not really to take lightly. Like these lyrics are crazy." He laughed and he said, "Yeah, babe, don't worry, everything's fine." And looking back um, to those times, and you're like, oh my God, he was telling me that he was going to pass, a couple months from the time that he sent that. And as individuals, sometimes we're not that aware of what's being said. I feel like words are very powerful and you can manifest anything. Um, and I feel like a lot of people would be like, just take it lightly, like, oh, haha, like, don't say that. You can't joke about that. And you really can't. Because then he ended up passing away like 3, 4 months later.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
it was like little signs that maybe he wasn't okay.
right.
And then, and then, so w- at the time that he passed,
Mhm.
you knew somehow something was wrong. What was it like for you?
So that day, I would normally get like a message from him in the morning. Hey, babe, I woke up. I'm getting ready to go to work. Or hey, I'm getting in the car to go to work. Or hey, I'm on my way to work. And that day, he would start work at like 10. And that day, I didn't receive anything. And I thought it was weird. So it was like 10 something. And I decided to text his boss and one of his best friends that worked with him. I said, hey, is Anthony there? I woke up and I knew something was off, but then he wasn't replying. So I texted his coworker and his boss, and they said, no, he's not here and he's not responding. So I'm like, well, that's really weird that he's not responding. So inside, I was like, maybe something's wrong. And I got ready. I told my mom she could watch the baby for a couple of hours. And I got dressed. I drove to his house, and his car was still there and his bike was still there. And I walked into his house and he was non responsive.
So you found him.
Correct.
It feels so overwhelming to think of what you must have experienced in that moment. How did you be able to function? How were you able to, call the police, call the hospital, like do all the things that's necessary in that moment?
So when you see something like that, your spouse or a family member or somebody that you really genuinely care for and they're not responsive, I went into shock. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my whole body just froze. I couldn't really speak. So I I called my mom and I told her that he had passed away, and she screamed. She's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What I just said." She's like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" Like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. What do I like? I don't know what to do. So I hung up, and then I called his best friend. I said, "Hey," he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, he's passed away." He's like, he screamed on like the other side. He's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "He's not here. Like, he's here, but he's when I walk,
Not here.
yeah, not here, not
Oh my
responsive."
God, honey.
So I said to him, because my brain didn't understand what to do next. So he's like, "You have to call the cops." So I was like, "What do I do?" And he's like, "Call the cops." I call the cops, and they're like, "Just wait outside." And I waited outside, and they got there, and then a lot of his friends started coming over. And I remember that day, it was Friday the 13th, and it was pouring rain. It was pouring rain. It was a day that just didn't stop pouring. And it's been a whirlwind of emotions since then.
Oh, honey, I can just imagine. And I do know a bit of it,
Yeah.
right? But I just, again, want to say how brave and courageous you are to share this story with the hope that your story can be someone else's survival guide, because it's unimaginable what you experienced in that moment. And it's something that I don't think, if you haven't seen something like that, you will ever be able to truly understand. And I will share a story with you. So just to like bring the moment down a little bit. Um, so years ago, I lived in Chicago and I worked downtown at a hotel. It was one of my favorite jobs I ever had. I worked the front desk of a very luxurious hotel, and it was awesome. It was a great job. And I would have to drive down on Lower Wacker Drive, Chicago, and know what I'm talking about. But there's like two parts to this expressway, and there's a lower part, and the other part of the highway or expressway is elevated. It's almost like a tunnel in a weird way. And I had to drive down there. And when I drove down there, I was kind of driving, And I looked over and I saw a man laying in the street.
Mhm.
Oh, this was like, he wasn't a bum or anything like that. Like, it was like a very well dressed man who looked like a suburban guy. And he was just, it was the way in which he was laying
Mhm.
that I, like, all the air caught in my throat. Like, my heart felt like it was going to stop, because from one look, I knew that this person, their soul was no longer in their body. And it took me all of 3 seconds to see the scene. I saw one shoe in the street, him face down on the sidewalk, and it wasn't he was drunk and passed out. It was different, right? And it felt like it was just a horrible thing to see. And it had the feeling of someone that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe had been drunk in the city, wandered down the wrong way, got turned around, because he obviously wasn't like a city guy. He was a suburban guy. You could tell by the way he was dressed. And I got to my job like 3 minutes later, and I called the police. And I was confused because my mind did not want to believe what I thought that I saw. So when I called the police, I was like, there's a guy laying in the street and I'm not sure that he's okay. Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I was. Even though inside my body, everything was screaming that his soul was no longer on this plane of existence. And so then, the cops were like, "What's the location?" I told them. And later that day, I called the police station and I said, "Hey, I called in about a man in the street this morning. I just want to make sure he's okay." And they wouldn't give me any information.
Mhm.
But the woman who answered the phone, from the sound of her voice, and kind of, she was like, "Oh, right. I'm so sorry. We cannot give you any information on that case." And I
Mhm.
was like, because I just knew, right? I knew in my heart and my soul that the man had been killed. So I've never forgotten that, obviously. And I know that this wasn't someone that I was currently in love with, planning a future with. And I know that even when we go through a breakup, it's the future that's the hardest part of the breakup, right? So it's that in future vision that we held with this person that's not going to happen now because we've broken up with them. And as you're processing through a breakup, that is one of the hardest parts to get past in the breakup, is the fact that the future that you were envisioning is not going to happen or may not happen. Because with a breakup, it's a lot different. Like, you can reconcile. But in this situation, how do you begin to process the fact that this person that you loved and loved you has left this plane of existence? How do you get to where you are? Because you're far from, this did happen in October, so it's recent, but not like last week.
Right.
How do you get to the strength